everyone. I hope you're all doing really well. It's obviously been quite chaotic for people at this point in time. The energy has been very intense, very extreme. So I hope you're all hanging in there, because we are going to be moving into a little bit easier energy coming into the end of the year and moving into the new year. So really what I wanted to do was just have a bit of a chat. We recently had the traditions of Beltane in the southern hemisphere, and for those of you in the northern hemisphere, that was Samhain or Halloween. And for myself, I tend to sort of go with the flow when it comes to celebrating these kind of things. I do identify as a green witch, as many of you know, and I kind of want to point out that for any of you who perhaps are on your early path or new path when it comes to anything to do with witchcraft, paganism, or even just a spiritual practice and wanting to honor the cycles of the seasons, one of the things I used to put a lot of pressure on myself when it came to all of these particular times of the year was feeling like I had to do something really big. You know, it's especially within the spiritual community, you tend to see on social media a lot of people making this these massive rituals and talking about things, you know, and really going all out to make the pretty photos and the pretty videos and talk about their practices on an individual level. And while it can be amazing to do extremely elaborate and glamorous rituals, I also find that sometimes some of the easiest things to do is just simply by acknowledging the tradition. I'm sorry, you have to excuse the background noise. That's my cats. They decided to start fighting. Every time I turn the camera on, they always start to make noise. So I really kind of wanted to talk about how I work with this energy and how, especially for those of us in the southern hemisphere, it can be quite complicated because on the big ones like Halloween, for example, Christmas, Easter as well, because these are seen as global traditions, it's quite hard to find your ground and find your footing. And even as well, when you're in a spiritual community, you quite often can find when people are sharing things, they're talking about, you know, fall, for example, because those in the northern hemisphere are going through autumn, moving into winter. And, you know, there's a lot more people on social media and there's a lot more energy in the northern hemisphere as opposed to the southern hemisphere. So it can be quite complicated for us here to what we celebrate and how we celebrate and that kind of energy. So, you know, there's some people that you might find that will say you still follow the traditional wheel of the year, so they would be celebrating the fall traditions right now. And then there's other people that say it's because it's seasonal, you celebrate seasonal. At the end of the day, this is something that I do find is very connected to your personal belief, personal path, and doing what feels right for you. For those of you who are interested, I have done a little bit of informational videos on Wicca and witchcraft as well, so I can pop them as a link below in this video as well if you're interested in checking that out. I didn't want to go into too much detail about it right now, but I just kind of wanted to say how, for me, I have found over the years that honoring both, especially on these really big ones like Halloween and Easter and Christmas, though here we are in the opposite time of the year for what those traditions are, I actually find it's fun to kind of celebrate both. So for example, October 31st was Samhain or Halloween and Beltane, which it was also a full moon as well, so the energy was highly charged. It was a blue moon as well, and blue moons are just intense energy. So it was a very potent energy, and I had a lot of plans for what I wanted to do, and all these ideas that I was going to do. And even with uploading this vlog, I wanted to do it closer to that time, and I did film some of the footage from then, but I actually didn't end up uploading the vlog, and that's partly because I had all of my zodiac readings that came out at the same time, and zodiac readings take a lot of energy. It's 12 individual readings, so it takes a lot of time. And for those of you who don't understand the process of filming and stuff, especially with how I do things, it takes a lot as well when it comes to uploading things. You know, you film the video, which can be anywhere between 10 to 20 minutes for a reading, and then it's a process of transferring it from the camera to the computer, and then it's cutting all the files together, because the files don't stay as all individual files, and then it's a matter of downloading that and then uploading again to the back end of YouTube, and then you've got to put in all of the descriptions, the thumbnails, links, and all that kind of stuff that you need to put in. So I'm not complaining about it, I enjoy the process, but it's a long, time-consuming process, and that kind of took all of my energy over that particular time. So I did work on a few things. I actually uploaded on October 31st, I uploaded my introduction to my channel video, so which is something that I've had on the to-do list for quite a while, so I was quite happy with that. And I really just did very simplistic stuff. So for me, because it's Beltane, I did get into the garden a little bit. I wanted to do a little bit more. I spent some time over the weekend doing a lot of gardening, doing some cleaning up and stuff, and also just honouring the energy that's there, because Beltane is a spring festival, it's a fertility festival, it's strongly connected to the Fae energy as well, and I really connect with the Fae energy, I always have. So I really did connect with them through the gardening aspect, and I also spent some time honouring the ancestors as well from the Samhain tradition. So what I find, because the veil between the worlds is at its thinnest during this particular time, in springtime it's very thin in regards to connecting with Fae energy. With Samhain it's connecting with the ancestors. Traditionally on the wheel of the year as well, Samhain is seen as the Wiccan New Year or Pagan New Year. So again, it's kind of like this endings and this new beginning as well. So in some ways for us here in the Southern Hemisphere, we actually get to enjoy the best of both worlds when it comes to that, because we have this fertile new beginning with spring energy, and then celebrating the ending as well from the Northern Hemisphere. So we kind of get this great balance that comes through as well. So for me, all I did with honouring the ancestors was I have particular photos of family members who have passed or friends who have passed, and I moved them onto one of my altars, which I like to kind of call my working altar. It's in my study or my office, which is where I do all of my videos and readings and writing and meditations and things like that. So it's kind of like my active altar. So I moved them onto there and burnt some incense and some sage just to cleanse the energy, and lit a candle as well in honour of the ancestors. Because Beltane is seen as a fire festival, I found that's quite significant, of lighting a candle in terms of remembrance for the ancestors as well. For the lead up to that particular week, I actually did, I'm a bit weird, maybe it's because I'm a Scorpio, but I actually was being drawn to visit cemeteries. I know that sounds very cliche, but to me and I was planning on visiting my ancestors' cemetery, which isn't local, but I didn't end up going there. I ended up going to a local one just down the road from me, and I stopped in at one on my way to and from work, there's a really, really old one in a place that's no longer a township. It used to be a township, but it's no longer there, and the only thing that's remaining is this cemetery, which is like not even looked after. It's not even an active cemetery anymore, and I drive past it every single day, and I have my whole life because I work for my parents, so it's going up and down to the family home. And I stopped in for the first time ever. I just had this calling to do so. And I know that cemeteries sound kind of a bit weird to go and visit. The local one down the road, I've actually visited quite a few times. I used to find peace and relaxation. Now, I want to just put a caveat here. I never go to cemeteries at nighttime. I only ever go during the day. Dusk and twilight times are okay, but I've never really gone at night, and the times that I have gone at nighttime, I've never gotten out of my car because I just can't connect with that energy. Mediumship is something that I haven't opened myself up to. I used to deal with it a lot as a child, but I kind of closed that side of myself off, so I always get those kind of vibes. So I only ever go during the day, and I have enough stuff happen during the day as well. But I digress. The reason why I like to go there is because, to me, I don't need to know someone. I don't need to know the person to feel that connection to history. And I'm someone who has an obsession with history. I love history. Even as a little child, I used to research ancient Egypt, and I'd come home from school and sit down in my bedroom with all of my books on ancient Egypt, and tried to teach myself how to read and write hieroglyphics, and learning about other aspects of history in terms of the Greeks and the Romans and mythology and stuff. So I've always had a fascination with history, and if you couldn't tell, I have an obsession with knowledge and books as well. I mean, this is one bookshelf. I've got another one like this size. It's on the other side here, and another one that's like about that height, just behind this camera here. So that's about half my books, 3/4 of my books, and I look at not just non-fiction books but also fiction as all forms of history and knowledge, because even a fiction story is a connection to something that person created. I mean, I've always said, where do people get ideas from? They have to get them from somewhere. They can't just magically appear. They exist in the ether. They exist in consciousness in some way, shape or form. What's to say that these worlds don't exist in another alternate reality? I'm not going to go into that. And I'm sure some of you are going to go, that sounds really intense and crazy. But going back to cemetery aspects, I love to walk through cemeteries and read gravestones and history, especially really, really old ones. And the one down the road from me does have quite a few old ones. There's a lot of new ones as well. It's still an active cemetery. They've still got plots available. But the very old gravestones, some where you can barely see the writing on them, I just find it fascinating because it's forgotten history. These are people who lived and walked and existed in our lives, and we will never know about a lot of these people. And it's like you can feel their stories, and it's like walking through cemeteries is like walking through untold stories to me, and untold history. And I just have a deep fascination with that, a deep connection with that. And I also like to think that when I do that, for that brief period of time, I'm honoring that person's memory. I may not know them, I may not be able to connect with them in any way, shape or form, but I'm honoring that person's memory and their story by bringing life back to it. In some ways, it's kind of like how, if you look at ancient Egypt, for example, walking through the temples and talking about the stories of the kings and the queens and the people who lived in those days, the tombs, we are bringing them back to life in many ways, because we are sharing this story again. And that's how I feel with walking through a cemetery. I don't see cemeteries as that stereotypical haunted, energy. Sure, there's a lot of energy that goes on there, but for the most part, I feel like it's seen in a very negative way, and it's in some ways, it also makes you feel lucky to be alive. It gives you that perspective on life, especially when you see so many old like gravestones that are dated back to the 1800s, and seeing how young people were when they died, and just giving that fresh breath of life into us again. So I did do that through the lead up to it, and then for the past week, so I kind of like to work in cycles. I like to work with the moon. So because Samhain and Beltane was on the 31st, which was the full moon, I like to sort of look at it in the sense of working from full moon to new moon. So the new moon's not until next week at the time that I'm filming this. So I kind of like to work with that energy still, that we're still riding that energy of Beltane or Samhain as well. So I have been in that process, still lighting the candle. I still have my photos of my past family members on the altar as well. And this is not everyone, this is just, we don't really have, photos aren't a massive thing these days, so I only have a few. But it's just honouring that ancestral line and that connection. And I've also been doing a lot of research into family history. This is something that I love and I do all the time. And I am very, very lucky that I have a family member in England who is also an author, who has extensively tracked our family history, and she has it all on her website as well. And our family history is so rich and so vibrant, and she's always finding new things as well. And it's so this is all on my mother's side, and the history there is, it's like reading a story. Our family history is just so amazing throughout England, and I'm very lucky that I have the access to that. I haven't had to do anything. I just keep up to date with her work, and the study that she does. I'm very lucky that she just released something, for example, that was talking about where our family actually originated coming from, and we've actually got Viking ancestors as well, which is something absolutely crazy because our whole family history was through England. And we've been tracked all the way back to certain family lines have been tracked all the way back to like the 1100s, and we've got family members, and our family was very prominent as well. They were very closely related and close in connection to the royal families. They held a lot of land and a lot of castles and a lot of that, which makes me go, well, where the hell did it all go now? But our family throughout history was very prominent and involved in deep historical aspects throughout our life. And the recent one that she's just discovered, we knew that our family was from Normandy, and they had travelled from Normandy into England and settled in England, but they've actually tracked back further to that now, and realised that our family would have been one of the first settlers in Normandy, which was in France, and connected to the Vikings, who actually came from their area to settle in France itself, and they were the people who created the Normans. That was who settled it, and our family would have been very closely linked to it was actually King Rollo. For any of you who have watched Vikings, it's not historically accurate, but Rollo was Ragnar Lothbrok's brother in that series, so it kind of gives you a rough idea of who Rollo was, and understanding his allegiances, how he actually Rollo in history was very accurate in this sense, where he actually did come into France, and the Vikings wanted land. They wanted land for farming, and he made a deal with the King of France and said, if you allow us to settle here, I'll help protect you against any other Vikings that try and invade. So that's who Rollo was in history. And our family line has been tracked back to that particular era. And that's where the original line from one of these aspects of our family history was from. So it's very interesting understanding that. And I've gone a lot deeper into my family history with studying that as well. So I'm going to stop talking about it because I'm already making this video 20 minutes long. And you know, no one wants to sit here all day long and hear about my history. So really that is essentially what I've been doing, is looking into honouring the ancestors. I've been doing a lot more deeper research into my ancestral history as well. And I also wanted to just quickly bring to light something that is closely connected to this, and this is about connecting to all ancestors and understanding the ancestral line of the places that we live in as well. And for myself, I've only recently started looking into this. I mean, I live in Australia, so Australia does have a rich cultural history in terms of the Aboriginal heritage, but it's not widely understood or known because we just don't look into it. And I'm sure that's quite similar in many other places as well. So I've just started looking into Aboriginal history and starting to open up that door a little bit more. And for example, here in our parliament, we've just had our first Aboriginal woman who was elected into our parliament as well. So I've been following her on social media, and it was actually through this that something came to light. And in I believe it's New South Wales, there is a situation that is unfolding at this point in time, and this is not unusual in all places in the world, but there's a situation where there's a highway that is being built, and the Aboriginal peoples have been in conflict with the government because where the highway is being built, they're destroying ancient trees. And these trees are, the arborists are claiming that they're only around 350 years old, but then there's some trees that the Aboriginal people are claiming that could be, 800 years old or older, but they are very sacred. The ground that they are trying to cut through is sacred country, and these trees, and I am apologizing in advance if I'm getting any of this incorrect. It's just the very basic understanding that I have from very basic things that I've done to research it once this came to light. But the trees that they were cutting down, one was called the direction tree. And for any of you who've watched Avatar and understand the connection to home tree, when they cut down home tree, this is kind of the way that they've explained this process. So the direction tree that they did cut down, it has been cut down, and I also discovered that they didn't just cut the tree down. The tree, which is sacred, is very, very sacred to the Aboriginal people on that land, they then sold the wood to a firewood company. They didn't even give the wood back to the Aboriginal people. And the direction tree, why it's so sacred is because when it's so on this land, there is also grandmother trees and grandfather trees, and I believe the grandmother trees are the birthing trees, and this is where people have given birth over the generations. And what happens is once they have given birth, the placenta is planted with a seed, and the seed is that tree. It's called the direction tree, and for the Aboriginal people, that direction tree becomes known as their personal spiritual tree. And the trees have got like the woods had carvings and stuff in it, and the direction tree is a place where you can go to throughout your life if you are needing spiritual direction, and needing to connect with your ancestors and just needing spiritual guidance. and this is something that is very sacred. Now, within this process, they have saved some trees. They've allowed some trees to be saved, but they're also cutting down others. The trees that they are keeping to saying that they're saving are anything older than 350 years, but anything less than that, from my understanding, I don't know if this is correct, is being cut down. So it was quite shocking to see that this is something that is happening. I understand that we are trying to build things. This is, I believe this part of the highway is going to save about 3 minutes of time. So it's not even a massive amount of time, but there's just no working around it, and it's quite depressing when you think about it. We live in, this is 2020 at the time of filming this, and we still don't have a respect for cultures. We still don't have a respect for the land and working with the land and understanding that, you know, we have the abilities to work hand in hand with each other at this point, whether it be moving in a different direction or leaving the trees in the landscape and working around it. You know, there is always a solution. But unfortunately, in this case, it has been destroyed, and there are people who are camped out and activists who are on the land trying to halt this from happening. And I do believe that there's a little bit of conflict there as well, because one of the particular Aboriginal couples who have camped out on the land, they've built themselves a little shack to try and stay there. It's actually known as women's country. So from my understanding, that means that men can't actually be on this sacred ground because it's women's territory, women's country. So there's a bit of conflict there as well. As I said, I don't know much, I only know basics, but I really just wanted to bring this to the forefront and talk about it, because it's about honouring ancestors. It's about honouring our connection to our ancestral line. We may have been, our culture may have come from another place. We may have come from, you know, England or wherever it might be. Australia is always known as the convict country. So we have this history where we weren't the first ones here. We need to acknowledge the people who were the first ones in this country, but at the same time we also need to work together, because we all live here now, and we can't just keep imposing one belief over the other, and the people who are in power pushing the others to the side. You know, we can work in harmony. We can create a rich cultural history that is combining everyone's beliefs, everyone's ancestral lines. And I find it very depressing and sad that something so sacred that I had no idea about, this is the first time I'm hearing about it, and I would love to learn more about this. We don't get taught this in schools or anything like that. Like, there's just not a lot of knowledge out there. So I really just kind of wanted to bring awareness to it as well, because especially here in Australia, the Aboriginal peoples don't have much of a voice. They do struggle, and there is a stereotype that unfortunately falls on their shoulders. There really needs to be changed, and I do feel like if there's one thing that we can learn from history, it's that we can't continue to keep repeating the same things. The ancestors are there to help teach us and help guide us in moving forward, and I do feel at this particular time with this happening that it's very significant, because it happened around the time where the veil is the thinnest and when we are connecting with the ancestors. And it's just this sad feeling. I mean, those of you who watched my last vlog as well, you would have seen me going to the forest and seeing that the trees were being cut down because they're logging that area, because it's an agricultural farm for pine wood. You know, so it's this repeat process that we have where we just dismiss spiritual wisdom, we dismiss ancestral wisdom, because we're only focused on the future. We're only focused on our own wants and needs. We're not focused on the wants and needs of everyone. We're not focused on understanding that we can learn from the past to create a better future. So I'm gonna leave it there, because this is already a 30-minute long video. For those of you who have watched all of this, thank you for putting up with listening to me. I really do hope that you had a great Samhain or Beltane wherever you are, and I'm really hoping that in the next few weeks as well that you can enjoy this energy that is going to start to settle, and things should start to find a little bit more equilibrium as well. Thank you so much for joining me. I am sending you lots of love and light. Take care, everyone. Bye.